They laughed when I walked out. They didn't know I was walking away with everything. My name is Sienna. I'm 34 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The courtroom was too quiet. That kind of silence where every shuffle, every cleared throat, every second hand on a Rolex felt like it echoed off marble and judgment. The air smelled like old paper and expensive perfume. Courtroom cologne, the kind attorneys wear when they know they'll be photographed. I sat stiffly behind my lawyer, palms resting on the edge of the polished table. The wood was cool under my skin. Solid, like it might anchor me if the weight in my chest started to show. The judge's voice was a dull metronome, reading off procedural motions. Click. Another pen scratched notes. Rustle of someone's suit jacket behind me. I shouldn't have checked my phone, but I felt it buzz once against my thigh, then again, and again. The third buzz, that's the one that got people shifting. Subtle. A glance from the woman 2 rows back. A whisper exchanged behind me. Something was happening. I hadn't looked yet. I still believed I had control. Then my lawyer leaned slightly toward me. Mark. Do you want to take a break? His tone had shifted. Me. Why? Mark didn't answer. He just glanced at my bag, at the phone still pulsing like it had something to say. So I pulled it out, and there it was. A push notification, bold and brutal. Exclusive. Private texts reveal plaintiff's true motives. See the screenshots that paint a different story. My name was right underneath the headline. The screenshots weren't just familiar. They were mine. Messages I'd sent in grief. Messages I'd sent in fear. Messages I thought were private. Locked between me and someone I used to trust. She had leaked them. She, meaning Camille, my ex-best friend, my former co-founder, my co-defendant, until 3 months ago when she struck a private deal and left me to burn alone. My fingers trembled as I tapped into the article. The blogger had posted my texts, cherry-picked, out of order, twisted for maximum damage. The first one read, "We just need to get through this without anyone seeing the books." It was real. I'd said it, but what the post didn't show was the line that followed. "Until the audit confirms we did everything right, Camille, I'm begging you, don't panic." I felt something in my chest crack, not loudly, just a quiet splinter. The judge hadn't looked up yet, but murmurs were spreading like ink in water. Phones were glowing across the courtroom. The bailiff shifted uneasily. Mark leaned closer again. "Mark, we need to request a recess, right now." I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, because she hadn't just leaked my messages. She had timed it. She waited until this exact moment, until I was seated, silent, unable to speak, until the courtroom was watching, until the judge was about to call my name. That's when the blog post went live. Public perception was already shaky. But now it looked like I was hiding something, manipulating the court. I could see Camille 2 rows ahead, hair perfectly waved, that gold necklace I'd helped her pick out glinting like a dare. She turned slightly, just enough to glance back, and smile. A soft, smug smile like she'd already won. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand and tell everyone what she'd done, who she really was, how this whole lawsuit wasn't about fraud, but revenge. She wasn't a victim. She was bitter. I had pulled out of the partnership before the IPO. I had refused to sign her buyout clause, and she hated me for it. But I stayed still, because Mark's voice echoed again. Low, firm. "Mark, we request a recess, Your Honor." And the judge finally looked up. Not at Mark, not at me. At his clerk, whose phone buzzed once on the desk before she shoved it into her purse. "Judge Holloway." "Granted, 10 minutes. I rose with my lawyer, legs stiff, stomach numb. As we stepped into the hallway, the door clicked shut behind us, and the silence outside the courtroom felt heavier than the noise inside. Mark didn't speak until we reached the end of the corridor. "Mark, we need a strategy, right now." Me. "She timed it." Mark. "I know." Me. "She sent them to that blogger." Mark hesitated. His silence said enough. Mark, even if she did, proving it's another battle. And it could backfire. Me, so what do I do? Let it spin? Mark looked at me with something softer than pity, but not quite belief. Mark, you stay calm. You survive this part, then we work. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I had no idea what else to do. By the time we returned, the courtroom was no longer quiet. It was tense, the kind of tension where nobody says anything, but everyone has already read the same thing. I sat. I folded my hands. And I let Camille believe she'd won, because even then, I was already thinking about the typo. One line in the blog post didn't sound like me. It was small, but wrong. A sentence ended with your instead of your. I don't make that mistake, ever. That wasn't my message. She'd edited it. And suddenly, I didn't feel helpless anymore. The sound of my own breathing grew sharper, clearer, like someone had pulled me back into focus. I could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the distant echo of a door closing down the hall, the muffled rhythm of heels clicking past the marble floor, all of it grounding me in one truth. She thought she'd destroyed me, but she had just handed me proof. I tucked my phone away, spine straightening as the judge re-entered. He gave the room that warning glance that always preceded order, the kind that said he'd seen enough chaos for one day. And yet, beneath that stern control, I saw curiosity. Everyone had read it, even him. Mark whispered, "Let them think you're broken. It buys us time." But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. My pulse had steadied, and behind the numbness, a different kind of clarity was forming. Not rage, not despair. Precision. Because that typo wasn't just a mistake. It was her fingerprint. Camille had always been careless with language. She rushed, she skimmed, she wrote like she spoke, fast, flashy, desperate to impress. I'd edited her work for years, every email, every press release. I could recognize her writing from a mile away, so I sat there, letting the hearing resume, while behind my stillness something far more dangerous was forming. Intent. The judge's voice droned on again, but it barely reached me. I was back in our old office in my mind, the glass-walled startup we'd built from caffeine and ambition. I could still smell the whiteboard markers, see Camille laughing under neon lights at 2 a.m., telling me how we'd be unstoppable. We'd promised we'd never turn on each other, that we'd share everything 50-50. She was the dreamer. I was the architect. She brought the noise. I brought the order. It worked, until money arrived, and noise started to sound a lot like greed. And now here we were, the remnants of that partnership dissected in public view, reduced to evidence exhibits and tabloid fodder. I could feel her eyes flick back toward me once, testing, measuring whether I'd react. I didn't. I just sat with my hands clasped and my breathing even. If she thought silence meant defeat, good. I wanted her comfortable. I wanted her certain she'd already buried me, because she had no idea what I'd kept. Not revenge, not yet. Just receipts. The kind that live quietly in encrypted backups, time-stamped drafts, and IP logs no influencer gossip site could fake. I replayed the article in my mind, line by line, remembering where each message came from. One of them had been sent from her phone during a late-night brainstorm. I'd seen the read receipts back then. Another had been typed in Slack, not text, but the blogger had combined them like one conversation. She'd doctored the flow, and I knew exactly which platform held the real version. Evidence. That word hummed through my veins like current. The judge's gavel sounded once, calling for order as 2 reporters were escorted out for whispering too loudly. The sound sliced through the haze, anchoring me again. Camille's hair caught the light as she tilted her head, whispering something to her new attorney, a man in a navy suit who looked too proud of himself. I wondered if she'd told him the whole story, or just the version where she was the victim and I was the monster. People like her always rewrite their own betrayals until they sound like survival. Mark handed me a pen. Take notes. Keep your mind busy. But I wasn't thinking about notes. I was thinking about narrative, about control, about how quickly a story can shift depending on who tells it first. Camille had taken the first strike, but she'd also given me an opening. Every word she leaked would have metadata, timestamps, senders, device IDs. The blogger might think she'd been fed screenshots, but I could trace the origin. I'd built the back end of our early platform myself. Digital footprints were my fluency. My mind began structuring steps without me realizing it. Isolate discrepancies, trace upload patterns, identify linguistic fingerprints. My revenge wasn't anger, it was data. When the recess ended for the day, the courtroom buzzed with gossip energy, reporters trying to guess whether I'd cry, flee, or lash out. I did none. I rose calmly, smoothed my blazer, and packed my notes. Camille lingered near the aisle, pretending to check her phone. I passed behind her, close enough to smell her perfume, the same scent she'd copied from me years ago. She murmured without turning, "Camille, you should have kept your phone off." I didn't stop walking. Me, "You should have run your spell check." Her head snapped slightly, just enough for me to see the confusion flicker. She hadn't expected that. She didn't know I'd seen it yet. That moment, that tiny fracture in her composure, was all I needed. Outside, the afternoon light was too bright. The city noise surged like release after the courtroom's sterile air. Car horns, footsteps, snippets of reporters shouting questions. Mark guided me toward the stone steps, shielding me from the cameras. "Mark, don't say a word. Let them speculate." I nodded again, still silent. My phone buzzed once more in my bag. Another notification. Another headline. The story spreading like wildfire. But this time, I didn't flinch. The marble railing felt cold beneath my fingers as I paused halfway down the steps, watching flashes pop from the crowd below. People wanted a reaction, tears, fury, collapse. I gave them none, because inside my head, I was already building the counterstrike. That night, I wouldn't sleep. I'd sit in my apartment surrounded by open laptops, server logs, and a glass of wine untouched on the table. I'd trace that one wrong word, that single "your," back through digital threads until it led straight to her. But right now, under the harsh daylight and judgmental lenses, I simply turned to Mark and said quietly, "Me. She just made her first mistake." Mark frowned. "What mistake?" "Me. She forgot who built the system." Then I started walking again, down the courthouse steps, through the noise, through the cameras, not away from the war, but toward it, because Camille hadn't leaked my ruin. She'd leaked my beginning. Back in college, Camille used to say, "No, one checks the details if you make the headline dramatic enough." She meant it as a joke. Back then. But standing in that courtroom, I realized she hadn't been joking at all. She had built her entire exit plan around that principle. The headline was dramatic enough, and no one was checking the details. Not my investors, not my family, not even my attorney yet. After court that day, I went straight home to my apartment in Buckhead. It was the first night in weeks I didn't get a single message of support. Not one. My phone stayed silent, except for the relentless flood of alerts. People weren't calling to check in. They were watching me unravel. That blogger, Erica something, had written the piece with surgical cruelty. She described me as emotionally unstable, strategically manipulative, and obsessed with control. She quoted my messages, all stripped of context, wrapped in commentary that painted me as a woman trying to bury fraud beneath friendship. It didn't matter that the lawsuit was about a contract dispute, not fraud, not embezzlement. That didn't trend. But woman caught hiding books. That did. Camille didn't just want to win. She wanted to erase me. I stayed up all night that Friday. No music, no wine, just a laptop and that article. Reading it, rereading it, line by line. The glow of the screen was the only light in the apartment. It painted my reflection across the glass. Tired eyes, unwashed hair, a version of me I barely recognized. I used to be polished, composed, the kind of woman who rehearsed her boardroom lines until they cut clean. Now I looked like the headline she'd written about me. Each paragraph read like a dissection, each adjective a blade. It was past 2 a.m. when I saw the second inconsistency. A timestamp. One of the screenshots had a message dated Feb 23, 10:14 a.m. I was in court that day, and phones were supposed to be locked away in the witness prep room. Mine was. Camille's, on the other hand, she kept hers tucked in her designer tote, claiming she needed it for emergency childcare. She doesn't have kids. It hit me like cold air in the lungs. She didn't just leak my texts, she doctored them. She leaked them. From the courthouse. I sat frozen, staring at that timestamp. The cursor blinked at me from the edge of the screen, like it was waiting for me to move, to act, to breathe. I didn't. I just stared, my pulse a slow thud in my ears, and for the first time since this began, I felt something new. Not fear, not shame, control. I started pulling everything I had. The original message thread, from my backups, screenshots, metadata from my cloud account, even the email receipts showing when I exported the thread for court filing. Camille's versions didn't just twist meaning, they altered it. Words moved, punctuation changed, emojis added where none existed. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I'd panic, lash out, look unstable. I didn't. Instead, I did what she always underestimated me for. I waited. I watched. And then I called Mia. The call log blinked up at me as I scrolled through old contacts. Her number was still saved with a note from years ago. Mia, data forensics, caffeine addict, owes me one. I smiled for the first time in days. Mia was a friend from my MBA program in Chapel Hill. She specialized in digital forensics, now worked in Atlanta consulting for high-profile legal cases. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. My thumb hovered over the call button. It was almost 3 in the morning. I pressed it anyway. It rang twice before her groggy voice came through. Mia. Sienna? Me. Yeah, sorry it's late. Mia. You're alive, so that's a plus. What's wrong? Me. I need help, quietly. Mia. How bad? Me. Headlines bad. A pause. Then the sound of bedsheets shifting. Mia. Come in Monday. Don't bring your phone. Bring everything else. I could hear her tone sharpen mid-sentence. The sleepiness gone, replaced with professional focus. Me. Thank you. Mia. You still drink black coffee? Me. Stronger now. Mia. Good. You'll need it. The call ended. I stared at my reflection again in the dark screen, my face framed by the faint glow of the city through the blinds. I slept for 4 hours that night, but for once, the sleep wasn't haunted. No dreams of judges, of cameras, of Camille's gold necklace flashing like mockery, just the steady rhythm of something returning, composure. The next morning, I woke up to another article, a follow-up post from the same blogger, this time quoting an anonymous court insider claiming Sienna's demeanor suggests guilt. There were no quotes, no names, just shadows. I didn't cry. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't text Camille. I made a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and got to work. The coffee tasted bitter, but it was grounding. The steam rose against my face as I scrolled through my backups, isolating every file, every date. I renamed folders with calm precision, original threads, export logs, evidence. By noon, my dining table looked like a command center. Hard drives, receipts, open notebooks, sticky notes scrawled with dates and initials. There was a strange peace in it, order amidst chaos. By the time Monday came, the city was humid, heavy with summer. I drove to Mia's office in Midtown, an unmarked brick building above a print shop. Mia greeted me in a gray sweater and no makeup, her version of war mode. She looked me over once, and instead of pity, there was recognition. Mia. You look like you've been through hell. Me. You should see the headlines. Mia smirked, then motioned to the chair opposite her desk. The office smelled like toner and dust. Stacks of drives, cables, and monitors filled the room, blinking softly in rhythm like patient machines waiting for confession. I handed her the drive. She plugged it in, scanning the directory with eyes that never missed a detail. Mia. This isn't just unethical. If she did this on court property, it could be criminal. Me. What do I need to prove it? Mia. Time, and no one breathing down my neck. Me. You'll have both. I left her everything, my backup drive, export logs, cloud sync reports. Before I left, she handed me a burner phone wrapped in a small silver anti-tracking pouch. Mia, use this only for me, not a word to anyone. Me, even Mark? Mia, especially Mark. Lawyers talk, systems leak. I nodded. She wrote a number on a yellow sticky note and slid it across the desk. Mia, wait 72 hours, you'll hear from me. I tucked the note into my pocket like a lifeline. When I stepped outside, the city noise hit me all at once. Car horns, construction drills, a bus braking hard at the corner. Life kept moving, indifferent to scandal. I didn't open Twitter. I didn't answer emails. I let Camille run her victory lap. She gave an interview on a podcast the next day, all coy laughter and vague morality. Camille. Some people will do anything to keep power, but truth has a way of finding the mic. The host laughed too hard. The sound was syrupy, fake. I watched it once. Then I opened a new Google Doc. Title, Petition to Identify Source of Confidential Information. The words looked sterile, clinical, but they steadied me. This wasn't just revenge. It was repair. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to file. For the next 2 days, I barely left my apartment. I organized every document by relevance, cross-referencing email threads with court transcripts. I spoke only when necessary, grocery deliveries, brief check-ins with Mark, whose tone had shifted from confident to cautious. Mark, don't make any public statements. Me, I wasn't planning to. Mark, the press is circling. Me, let them circle, they'll find nothing. By the third night, I had memorized the city's silence. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint hiss of the AC, the distant train echoing through Atlanta's midnight streets. Every sound felt amplified, a reminder that I was still here, that I was still fighting. At 7:42 p.m. on Wednesday, my burner phone vibrated once. A single buzz. Mia's message popped up on the encrypted chat app she'd installed before I left her office. Mia, you've got her. Call me. My hands went cold. For a full minute, I just stared at the message, the glow of the phone cutting through the dim light of my living room. Outside, rain started tapping against the windows, steady and rhythmic, like a countdown. I exhaled, slow and deliberate. Then I pressed call. Whatever came next, Camille wouldn't see it coming because, while she had been busy writing headlines, I had been collecting proof. Mia's office smelled like burnt coffee and adrenaline. Screens lined the back wall, each one filled with data maps, server pings, and time logs that looked like constellations only she could read. She didn't look up when I walked in, just pointed to the chair across from her and said, "You need to see this." On the largest monitor, she pulled up 2 screenshots side by side, one from the blogger's site, the other from my original backup. At first glance, they were identical. Same words, same spacing, same thread color. But then she zoomed in. Mia, look here. This sent timestamp, 10:14 a.m., is labeled in Eastern Standard, but your phone settings were Central that week. Me. So? Mia. So whoever took that screenshot did it from a different device, not yours. My pulse steadied, the kind of calm that feels like a decision forming. Mia toggled again. The next file showed network logs from the courthouse guest Wi-Fi, traced through public IP listings. Mia. At 10:16 a.m., an upload of 36 megabytes hit a server used by the blog, same IP range as the courthouse router. Me. Meaning? Mia. Meaning she leaked them from inside, from her phone, during your hearing. It was the quietest victory I'd ever felt. No shouting, no fist pumps, just a low, steady hum in my chest. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Camille had cornered herself. Mia turned, eyes sharp. You need to move fast before they scrub logs. File your petition. Demand disclosure. Get the chain of custody on that data before she realizes what you know. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the hum of Atlanta traffic outside blending with the tapping of my keys. I wrote the motion myself. Line by line, every word precise, detached. Not angry, just factual. Plaintiff moves to compel identification of the source of leaked confidential communications published on March 12th by Erica Moore, operating under the domain Court Watch Confidential. It wasn't revenge, it was preservation. When the filing went public the next morning, I didn't have to say a word. The headline wrote itself. Plaintiff moves to expose source behind courtroom leak. By noon, Camille called. Her name flashed across my screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Me, Sienna. Camille's voice was soft, carefully balanced between concern and fear. Camille, hey, I just wanted to check in. You've been quiet. Are you okay? Me, you tell me. Camille, look, this whole blog thing, I had nothing to do with that. You know how people twist stories. I didn't interrupt. I just let her speak herself into a corner. Camille, I mean, the media's awful. They spin anything for clicks. Maybe you should issue a statement. Calm things down. Me, like the one you gave on that podcast? Silence. Camille, you listened? Me, hard not to when it's trending. She laughed, nervous. Yeah, that was taken out of context. Me, so were my texts. For the first time, her breath caught. What are you implying? Me, nothing yet, but if I were you, I'd call your attorney. They'll be getting served soon. I hung up before she could answer. That was the moment she knew. The next week was pure stillness. No more leaks, no more interviews. Until Friday. That's when the blogger, Erica, posted an update. Short, defensive, but telling. Per court order, I am cooperating with discovery requests related to March 12th publication. She didn't name Camille. She didn't have to. Inside that bland sentence was the sound of panic. By the following Monday, the court clerk notified both parties of a scheduled evidentiary hearing. Mark called me as soon as he read the notice. Mark, you did this quietly, huh? Me, I learned from the best. Mark, she'll try to settle. Me, I don't want money. Mark, then what? Me, truth, on record. 2 days later, I walked back into that same marble courtroom, the same polished wood, the same smell of paper and tension. But this time I didn't feel small. Camille sat at the opposite table, visibly thinner, eyes darting at every whisper. Her lawyer leaned toward her, muttering. The judge entered, and for the first time when my name was called, every head turned not with suspicion, but curiosity. I rose, calm, controlled. My attorney began, Your Honor, we have evidence suggesting the leak originated from the defendant's personal device on courthouse Wi-Fi during prior proceedings. The room stirred. Camille's attorney objected immediately, his voice too loud, too fast. Speculative, unsupported. Mark, not speculation. Exhibit 14. Mia's report, neatly bound, time-stamped, authenticated. The judge's clerk flipped through the pages, lips tightening. Judge Holloway, we'll review in camera. Counsel, approach. Camille's hands were clasped too tight, knuckles white. I looked at her, not to gloat, just to remember the moment. She wanted to humiliate me in front of the same walls. Now she would watch them close around her instead. The air in Mia's office had been thick with static that morning, that charged kind of quiet that comes right before a storm breaks. She was hunched over her workstation, hair tied up in a loose bun, a cold cup of coffee forgotten beside the keyboard. When she showed me the evidence, I felt the floor steady under my feet for the first time in weeks. The chaos that had followed the blog post had stripped me of certainty, made me second-guess every decision, every sentence I'd ever written. But now, the truth had texture. You could see it, line by line, on her glowing screen. Mia's voice stayed calm, but her hands moved fast. She didn't even bother masking her IP. That's arrogance, or stupidity. Me. Both. Mia nodded. She thought she was smarter. People like that always do. They think the system bends to charisma. I leaned closer, tracing the graph of connection pings she'd highlighted. The The green line flickered, pointing to a digital footprint so specific it might as well have been a signature. It wasn't just proof. It was her confession in data form. I remember the hum of the computer fans filling the silence between us. The realization that every humiliation, every whisper I'd endured these past weeks had been built on a lie. By the time I left Mia's office, the city felt different. The same streets, the same skyline. But I wasn't walking through shame anymore. I was walking toward reckoning. Back home, when I sat at the kitchen table to draft that motion, it felt like reclaiming oxygen. The legal phrasing was mechanical, but behind every comma lived a pulse. I wrote it with surgical precision, my fingers steady, my heartbeat slow. Outside my window, the streetlights glowed amber against the wet pavement. The city never slept, but it slowed, just enough for me to breathe again. When Camille's name flashed on my screen the next day, I already knew how I'd answer. I wanted to hear her voice, not for closure, but confirmation. I wanted to hear the performance crack. And when it did, when her soft, "Hey," trembled between apology and control, I knew she'd read the headline. For a brief second, I could almost see her, pacing her condo, rehearsing lies, still believing charm could fix everything. But charm doesn't rewrite server logs. That silence after I hung up wasn't emptiness, it was consequence. When Friday came and Erica's post went live, my phone lit up again. Texts from old colleagues, journalists fishing for comment, even my mother's cautious. Should I be worried? I typed one reply, no, then turned the phone face down, because this wasn't about defending my name anymore. It was about restoring gravity to a world she'd filled with noise. The courtroom felt smaller the day of the hearing, like the walls had drawn closer to witness what was coming. The polished benches gleamed under fluorescent light. The air carried that sterile chill that clung to courthouses, the scent of paper, polish, and performance. Camille avoided my eyes when I walked in. Her posture had changed, shoulders hunched, chin tucked slightly as if she could fold herself out of view. Her lawyer whispered in her ear, probably telling her to stay calm, that this was routine. But her hands betrayed her. She was shaking. When the judge called my name, I stood with quiet certainty. My heels echoed against the marble floor, one of those small sounds that felt bigger in the silence. This time, the reporters weren't smirking. They were listening. When Mark placed Exhibit 14 on the table, I caught a glimpse of the familiar formatting, Mia's sharp, clean style. Every piece of data aligned like a weapon. I didn't need to see Camille's reaction to know she felt it. Her world, her curated Instagram-perfect facade, was cracking in real time. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd tried to weaponize exposure, and now exposure was all she had left. When the judge called both attorneys forward, the shuffle of papers and the low murmur filled the room. I sat back, hands folded neatly, my reflection faintly mirrored in the polished surface of the table. For the first time, I didn't feel like a defendant. I felt like the author of the next headline. I used to think justice came with a bang, a gavel, a headline, a camera flash. But the truth is, when justice finally showed up for me, it arrived quietly, in the creak of leather chairs, in the way Camille's lawyer suddenly stopped making eye contact, in the silence that spread when the judge began to read. We were back in that same courtroom, 2 weeks after the evidentiary hearing was scheduled. Camille looked different, less polished, more strained. Her signature silk blouse was wrinkled at the sleeves, and there was a small tremble in her thumb as she tapped it against the table. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't need to. That morning, Mark and I had filed the final exhibit, the one Mia had pulled together after Erica, the blogger, caved under the subpoena. She didn't give us Camille's name directly. She gave us a string of evidence, a file named context1.dcm, a metadata trail that pointed to a device ID, one tied to Camille's iCloud account. A Dropbox upload pinged from a courthouse IP at 10:16 a.m., a matching document in a shared folder labeled CW Backups. It was surgical, precise, unforgiving. The judge flipped to Exhibit 14. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Holloway, Ms. Landers, do you wish to respond to this motion before I rule on admissibility? Camille stood. She didn't look at me, not even once. Her voice was thin, pressed. Camille, Your Honor, I wasn't aware that the documents in question were considered confidential at the time of release. Her lawyer flinched. Not dramatically, just a small movement in the jaw, a twitch that said, "She wasn't supposed to say that." Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. Judge, the protective order was issued 2 days prior. It was included in your filing packet. Camille, yes, but I wasn't the one who submitted them to the blog directly. I shared them with someone I trusted. I didn't know she'd post them. Mark leaned forward, voice calm. Mark, Your Honor, the device ID in question, ending in 61B, is registered to Camille Landers. The IP address used to upload the documents matches the courthouse guest network with a timestamp consistent with courtroom proceedings. The metadata indicates direct upload, not a forwarded file. The judge didn't respond immediately. He just closed the folder, and then, slowly, deliberately, he looked at Camille. Judge, I'm issuing a finding of contempt. The court will refer this to the appropriate disciplinary committee. Additionally, I am imposing a temporary gag on all parties regarding extrajudicial statements until further notice. Camille sank back into her chair. Her lawyer whispered something fast, urgent. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stared at the bench. For the first time since this lawsuit began, I didn't have to defend myself. The evidence did. The room emptied slowly, reporters whispering behind their hands. The courtroom artist flipped to a fresh page. The bailiff nodded at me as I passed, not with sympathy, but something quieter. Respect. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of gray that flattens everything, shadows, buildings, pride. Mark stood beside me near the courthouse steps. Mark, you want to make a statement? I shook my head. Me. Let her chase the silence for once. Mark smiled, slow. Mark, you were right. She overplayed it. Me. No, she just didn't think I'd play back. That night, I went home and opened the blinds in my living room. Downtown Atlanta buzzed beneath the glass, brake lights smeared like watercolor across the wet streets. I poured a glass of wine and deleted every social media app from my phone, not out of fear, out of peace, because tomorrow the same blogs that had dragged my name would be forced to issue updates. Camille Landers, contempt citation, violation of protective order, mistrial denied, plaintiff exonerated. She tried to destroy me with gossip. I answered with documentation. She thought I'd crumble under the weight of whispers. Instead, I buried her in facts. The morning had begun in slow motion, fog curling around the courthouse steps, the air heavy with the weight of expectation. The marble facade gleamed pale against the gray sky, like a monument to restraint. Inside, the courtroom was colder than I remembered. Or maybe it was just me, stripped of adrenaline, sitting in the space where months of humiliation were finally about to end. Camille's perfume used to announce her before she spoke. Citrus and something floral, confident, expensive. That day, I didn't smell it. Instead, there was the faint, human scent of stress, coffee, anxiety, a touch of fear. She kept her head down as the clerk called the case. The sound of her thumb tapping the table was the only rhythm in the room before the judge entered. I watched that tiny movement, the repetition of it, as if she could tap her way through the verdict. When the evidence binder slid across the polished wood toward the bench, I saw the weight of it register on everyone's faces. Each document was a nail, clean, metallic, irrefutable. Mia had done her job too well. The air thickened when Camille spoke. Her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. It carried a stutter of disbelief, as though she couldn't reconcile the image of herself, charming, in control, with the one crumbling now. When she said, "I shared them with someone I trusted," the courtroom shifted. The reporters in the back straightened, pens poised. The phrase, "someone I trusted," always made for a better quote than "I broke the law." The judge's silence was its own kind of thunder. His eyes lingered on her longer than anyone wanted. Even her lawyer stopped pretending to rearrange his notes. Mark's calm voice was the opposite of hers. Measured, steady, a counterpoint to chaos. Each word was a stitch pulling the narrative shut, sealing it where she'd tried to unravel it. When he said, "direct upload," it landed like a verdict before the verdict. The sound that followed wasn't loud, just the quiet collapse of pretense. Camille's shoulders rounded in on themselves. Her fingers fumbled for a pen, for posture, for anything to hold, but there was nothing left to hold. The judge's ruling came without fanfare, no grand moral speech, just clean procedure, contempt citation, referral, gag order. His tone was neutral, but there was something final in it, like a door locking. When she sank back into her chair, I watched her face, not to gloat, not even to savor it. I just wanted to see the moment when truth finally touched her, the disbelief, the dawning comprehension that all her control had turned to evidence against her. As we exited, the world outside felt muffled, as if even the city knew to keep quiet. Cameras clicked softly from the sidewalk, but the frenzy was gone. The spectacle had shifted. Mark adjusted his tie, his relief hidden behind professionalism. "You want to make a statement?" he asked, but it wasn't really a question. I shook my head. "Let her chase the silence for once." He nodded, eyes tracing the line of reporters waiting with microphones that no longer pointed at me. The drive home was slow, rain streaking across the windshield. The city lights blurred into ribbons, the wet pavement turning reflections into ghosts. For the first time in months, my phone didn't buzz. No notifications, no breaking news banners, just stillness. At home, the hum of the refrigerator was louder than usual. I left my heels by the door, dropped my bag on the counter, and poured wine into the first glass I found. It wasn't celebration, it was reclamation. When I deleted the social media apps, the icons disappeared one by one, little portals to noise collapsing into silence. The screen went blank. My reflection stared back from the black glass. I breathed. Slow, full. Tomorrow, the headlines would rewrite themselves. But for now, I didn't need anyone's version of my story. Because justice, it turned out, didn't roar. It whispered. It whispered through server logs and timestamps, through the creak of a chair, the shuffle of papers, the tremor in a guilty hand. Camille had tried to make me a headline. Instead, I became the fine print she couldn't escape. The day the press picked up the contempt citation, I didn't even know. I was walking through Piedmont Park with headphones in, trying to forget what day it was, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, then again, then a third time. Old contacts, people I hadn't heard from since the articles first dropped. One said, "Wow, tables turned, huh?" Another, "Are you okay? Saw the updates? Justice." I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because something about it all felt done, not over, not resolved, just closed. That weekend, the same gossip blogs that had torn me apart posted bland updates. Landersface's contempt citation. Confidential documents leaked amidst protective order. No apology, no retraction, but they took the original article down, the headline that started it all. Gone. And still, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Camille went quiet. Her lawyer filed a motion to settle. Mark showed me the offer. A decent number. Me. Can we go to trial? Mark. You'd win, but you'd bleed. I thought about it for a long time, and then I said, me. No public statement, no payout. Just withdraw her complaint. End it. Mark. You sure? Me. I don't want her money. I want my life back. The next week, I passed the courthouse on the way to a coffee meeting. It was dusk. The building glowed gold under the Atlanta sunset. For some reason, I slowed down and crossed the street. I stood outside the same doors I'd walked through, trembling 5 months earlier. The same doors where she smiled while my reputation shattered. The same courtroom where her silence once felt like a weapon. Now, the silence was mine. I pressed my hand briefly to the glass. No audience, no judge, no cameras, just me. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted by that room. I felt grounded by it, because everything that happened in there, every lie she spread, every humiliation she orchestrated, it taught me something she never intended to: how to fight with facts, how to stay quiet and wait until truth loads like a slow-burning fuse, how to rewrite a story without ever needing to scream. She leaked my messages to destroy me. I used the trail she left to rebuild. She called me controlling. She forgot I could control the facts. She framed me with fiction. I buried her with metadata. People still whisper about what happened, but the whispers don't hurt anymore. They're not about shame now. They're about curiosity. How did she flip it? Did you hear what she did in court? Is it true she walked away without saying a word? Yes, it's true. I didn't ruin her. I just stopped protecting her from consequences. Now, I live quieter. Smaller, maybe, but freer. I don't post online anymore. I don't share everything, and when someone asks about Camille, I just say, "She taught me something." And if they ask what, I smile, just a little, and I say, "She taught me that silence isn't weakness, it's the sound of evidence loading." That afternoon in Piedmont Park, the city was breathing again. It was one of those mild Atlanta days where the air tastes faintly of cut grass and rain that never comes. Joggers passed in rhythmic patterns. A saxophone played faintly near the fountain. The ordinary world, life, laughter, sunlight, all of it kept moving like nothing had happened. I sat on a bench near the lake, headphones in, music low. The kind of instrumental playlist you turn on when you don't want words, just sound. I could see my reflection rippling in the water. Not the woman from the trial, not the defendant or the headline. Just a person again. When my phone buzzed, I didn't even check the screen at first. For weeks, every vibration had felt like a warning, a new wound waiting. But that day, I just let it buzz against my palm. When I finally looked, I saw the messages. Friends, colleagues, even a few journalists trying to disguise curiosity as compassion. "Justice," one of them had written. About time. But justice didn't feel like time catching up. It felt like time letting go. I walked for another hour before heading home, taking the long route through the quiet streets lined with magnolias. The sunset turned the sky a muted gold, like the city had found its calm again. When I reached my building, I paused by the lobby mirror. The last time I'd really looked at myself, I'd seen exhaustion. Sleepless eyes, clenched jaw, the constant readiness to defend. This time, I just saw a woman breathing evenly. That night, I made dinner slowly: fresh pasta, garlic sizzling in olive oil, a glass of wine poured halfway full. It wasn't a celebration. It was an ending. The next morning, Mark called. Mark. We got the motion. Me. Camille's? Mark. Her lawyers. They want to settle. Withdraw the complaint. Mutual release. Full confidentiality. Me. And the payout? Mark. High. 6 figures. I looked out my kitchen window at the skyline, the tops of cranes catching sunlight. I could almost see the courthouse from there, its spire cutting through the haze. Me. Can we go to trial? Mark sighed. You'd win, but you'd bleed, Sienna. They'd dig into everything. Every text, every photo, every file. Even your wins would feel like wounds. Silence stretched. I thought about all the hours in that courtroom, the waiting, the whispers, the humiliation. The way the truth had come out not in fireworks, but in quiet data lines. Me. No public statement, no payout. Just withdraw her complaint. End it. He was quiet for a moment. Mark. You sure? Me. I don't want her money. I want my life back. He exhaled, almost relieved. Then it's done. And it was. The following week, I had a coffee meeting near Peachtree. On my way back, I passed the courthouse without meaning to. The traffic light changed, and there it was, rising ahead of me. The sky was brushed with dusk, that soft in-between light that turns everything gold for a few minutes before night swallows it. I slowed my pace. It looked smaller now, not because it was, but because I wasn't standing beneath it in fear anymore. I crossed the street, coffee still warm in my hand, and stopped in front of those tall glass doors. The marble gleamed. My reflection stared back at me, steady, unflinching. 5 months ago, I had walked through those same doors shaking, every step an act of survival. I could still feel it, the heavy doors closing behind me, the smell of paper and perfume, the sound of people choosing sides with their silence. But now there was no noise, no judgment, no eyes waiting for me to break. I pressed my hand lightly against the glass, like sealing something away. That place had once been my undoing. Now, it was just a building. And I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't need to rewrite the story. I'd already lived the ending. That night, I stood by my window again, watching downtown Atlanta pulse with its usual rhythm. Cars threading through intersections, lights flickering across high-rises, the hum of a city too alive to remember one person's scandal. The world had moved on. So had I. I poured myself another glass of wine and opened my laptop. Not to work, just to clear old files. I dragged the case folders, the evidence backups, the screenshots into the trash one by one. Each deletion felt lighter. When I reached the folder named Camille, I hesitated. My cursor hovered for a long second. Then I clicked. Gone. I sat there in the dim light, surrounded by quiet, not emptiness, peace. Because in the end, justice hadn't arrived with noise. It had arrived like closure, invisible, inevitable, and quiet. I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let the silence settle around me. Tomorrow, the blogs would run their retractions disguised as updates. People would talk. They always do. But none of it mattered anymore, because Camille had built her empire on attention, and I had learned to live without it. People still whisper. They always will. But the tone has changed. The same mouths that once called me manipulative now say, smart. The same coworkers who avoided me in meetings now linger too long to ask, how did you know? And every time I give the same answer, I didn't know. I just waited long enough for the truth to show up. The quiet has become my companion now. Not the heavy kind that suffocates, but the stillness that steadies. I don't post online anymore. I don't need to prove I'm fine. Because I am. When people mention Camille, I don't flinch. I don't relive it. I just nod, polite, detached. She taught me something, I say. And when they ask what, I smile. She taught me that silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of evidence loading. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.